Coming up on Lawmakers. U.S. District Court denies the motion to stay the redistricting order. Discussions on Hope Scholarship legislation continue at the Capitol. And Georgia is recognized as a national leader in preschool education. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for Thursday, February 19th. Here are your hosts, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, representatives of the PTA come to the Capitol to voice their opposition to legislation they say could lead to school vouchers.
And a visit by U.S. Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta brings Georgia's traffic congestion into the spotlight. But our top story tonight, the motion to stay the redistricting case is denied. A federal appeals court in Atlanta today said the redistricting of Georgia's House and Senate must continue. The court denied a stay of the order to draw new maps. Shortly after that decision, House Minority Leader Glenn Richardson was the first to tell the House Reapportionment Committee the news.
I am pleased to report to you that there's a new urgency about this process. I just came from the federal courthouse where Secretary of State Kathy Cox, the only party in this case, had attorneys today seeking a motion for stay. After hearing oral argument extensively, the judges recessed, went into their chambers, and came out and have just delivered these words and message to the Georgia General Assembly: stay denied.
Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson was also at today's hearing, and we talked with him shortly after the court ruling.
Well, basically, the court, in very strong language, told the state that the Georgia voters' constitutional rights had been violated. They needed to fix it, and they needed to fix it by March 1st, or they were going to do it. And it was time to quit all the maneuvering, spending money, and making excuses.
Legally, what is left for the Attorney General to do is an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court the only thing left that would keep redistricting from happening?
He could appeal to the Supreme Court, but these judges said very forcefully that it's very unlikely they would win on appeal. And I just wouldn't do anything else to make these judges any madder. They are very frustrated at what they see as a purposeful, partisan effort to maintain power by violating the civil rights of Georgians, and they're tired of it.
Also, this court order mandates that the redistricting be completed by March 1st, so obviously there would not be time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court and get a decision. So what posture does that leave the legislature in?
Well, the legislature can still meet the deadline of March 1st. The Senate will be voting on its map tomorrow morning. The House redistricting is meeting this afternoon, and we'll see how they come out. But we still have 9 days to go. It's certainly enough time to reach agreement on two different maps.
Secretary of State Kathy Cox apparently had a press release today indicating that in her opinion it would be very difficult to meet a March 1st deadline to draw new districts and get everything in order. Any response to that, or how do you think the court responded to that?
The court responded very strongly, because it's unusual that 2 years ago, when the states wanted to make these unconstitutional maps legal, they used a much shorter time frame. In other words, when the state wanted the unfair maps in a shorter time frame, they made it happen. Now that they don't want fair maps, they're throwing a whole bunch of excuses up in the air, and the judges just are tired of it.
The House Reapportionment Committee adjourned today without voting on any new House redistricting plan. We talked with Committee Chair Carolyn Hughley and Vice Chair Mary Margaret Oliver to get their reactions to this afternoon's federal court action.
Well, I'm not surprised, and our committee, as you can see, is working diligently trying to meet the deadline, which is what we now have to do, which we were under the impression that we were having to do all the time. So we're going to continue with our process and work as quickly as we can to meet the deadline.
I expected this court to deny the stay. The real issue is whether or not the United States Supreme Court grants a stay or not. We knew that this court was fixed. Our issue is the next step, the appeal before the United States Supreme Court. So it was no surprise today.
To recap, a federal appeals court today refuses to stay in order to draw new Georgia House and Senate maps. That same court ruled last week that current districts are unconstitutional. This is a victory for state Republicans who had challenged the legality of the current districts. Governor Sonny Perdue issued a statement within the hour which says, in part, the court has strongly urged the General Assembly to rise to this task, and I firmly believe that it is the responsibility of Georgia's election representatives to draw these maps. We should not have to rely on the court to do the people's work for us. Governor Perdue also called on Attorney General Thurbert Baker to, in the governor's words, stop wasting taxpayer dollars on appeals.
Well, there is some good news to report on the condition of former Speaker of the House Tom Murphy. He's been moved out of intensive care at Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta and is listed in stable condition after suffering a stroke last week. Mr. Murphy was elected to the House 44 years ago, became Speaker in 1973. He was a leading political figure in Georgia during 5 decades. He was the longest-serving state's House Speaker in America until he lost his re-election bid in 2002. Again, former House Speaker Murphy is out of intensive care, listed in stable condition at Piedmont Hospital, and we wish him well.
Well, the Hope Scholarship was the topic of discussion at a joint House and Senate Higher Education Committee meeting today. Lawmakers Chrissy Thrasher joins us live with more. Chrissy.
Well, and Wandy, the House and Senate Higher Education Committees continue to look at different ways to save the Hope Scholarship from running out of funds. Members of the House and Senate Higher Education Committees are presented with different scenarios for funding the Hope Scholarship.
Well, we continue to have information about lottery cost and projections. We're just looking at the numbers. We get some new numbers in, and we want to make sure those are factored into the equation, and we just keep coming back to the fact that the costs are rising faster than the revenues.
Among these scenarios included Governor Sonny Perdue's plan to link the Hope Scholarship to the SAT.
I believe that tying an SAT component to our Hope Scholarship is the right thing to do.
Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor's plan to freeze tuition and fees was also presented. Both scenarios projected that doing this would provide little financial benefit.
I don't think the governor's idea of linking SAT to Hope is a cost-saving measure, so you don't really get any cost savings. It's more an issue of having a standard measure. With regard to the Lieutenant Governor, he was concerned about the lottery projections and the fact that we had some growth in lottery revenues, and we wanted to model that and show what that did. Obviously, it puts off the problem a little while, but not long enough to change what we're recommending.
After the committee members were presented with these different scenarios, they met separately to discuss Senate Bill 471 and House Bill 1325. Both bills aim to preserve the Hope.
I think it's a good piece of legislation. We just need to convince some other members, and we're in the process of doing that, and we want it to continue to be bipartisan. We want the House and Senate to move at the same time, and so we're working on that, and we'll continue to do so.
And the House and Senate Higher Education Committees did not vote on these bills today. They remain in their respective committees until further review. Reporting live, I'm Chrissy Thrasher for Lawmakers.
Thanks, Chrissy. Well, in other education news, the National Institute for Early Childhood Education today announces that Georgia's pre-K program is among the top 3 in the country. Governor Perdue encourages the House to pass Senate Bill 456 in order to increase the program's success.
One of the cornerstones of our education package, GeorgiaLearns.com, is the creation of Bright from the Start, Georgia's Office of Early Care and Education.
Governor Perdue's plan to reorganize the Office of School Readiness has cleared the Senate. If SB 456 becomes law, Georgia could be poised to become one of the first states to administer its own Head Start program. Head Start has educated over 21 million low-income children since it began 4 decades ago. Many Democrats at the state and national level oppose state control of the program because states could use the money for other purposes, especially in cash-strapped times. Today, Congresswoman Denise Majette weighed in with her support for the current Head Start program.
I am a strong advocate for fully funding Head Start.
The National Institute for Early Education rates Georgia's enrollment rate and curriculum highly, but was critical of teacher preparation.
Many states require a 4-year degree in early care and education. In Georgia, our minimum requirement for a lead teacher is an AA degree, although we do have about 80% of our teachers do have 4-year degrees, so we're very fortunate for that.
Now, Oklahoma and New Jersey are the other 2 preschool programs classified as exemplary in the 2003 State Preschool Yearbook.
Today is Parent-Teacher Association Day at the Capitol. PTA leaders took the opportunity to speak out against cuts in education spending. Jesse Freeman is live at the Capitol with more. Jesse.
Gerald, Georgia PTA President Sherry Eastburn says that over the past few years, cumulative cuts to education total nearly $600 million, and that a recent proposal by the House Appropriations Committee to restore some funding does little to offset that burden. She also spoke against resolutions in both houses that would provide for a vote on a Faith and Family Services Amendment to the state constitution.
We've gone through a year of austerity with over $12 million of reductions to our 04 budget. We're going into 05 with an additional 2,000 students and facing significantly more cuts. we've been told that we're going to have additional flexibility in education. That's well and good. We need the flexibility, but we cannot spend flexibility.
When you talk to your legislator today, the message is anything but education, and you tell them the same thing you tell your kids. Your actions speak louder than your words. Either education is a priority or it isn't.
PTA also proposed legislation that would clear the way to repeal the Blaine Amendment. That's an action they say would lead to school vouchers.
What the repeal does, is, although well-intentioned, opens the door to the use of public tax monies to fund non-public schools.
Now the Faith and Family Service Amendment would repeal the state's Blaine Amendment, which restricts public funds going to private organizations, but resolution sponsors say this is not about vouchers. Now the PTA also had informational panels set up where they offered free candy and the like, and a spokeswoman says that they were specifically giving out flavored suckers like these to anyone who believed that Faith and Family Service Amendments were not about vouchers. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Well, third graders who take the state criterion reference and competency test this spring could be the first to be retained under a state academic promotion policy adopted almost 4 years ago. The House agrees to Representative Bob Holmes' bill delaying implementation of the program for 1 year, but with an amendment that allows systems to keep third graders from moving to the fourth grade as long as test scores are reported to the state by May 26th. Representative Holmes said he was totally unaware that Representative Jan Jones had been working with Representative Jeanette Jameson on this amendment, and this will impact how the Education Committee handles Governor Sonny Perdue's education plans.
The author, who was a member of the committee, who was there in the debate, who had an opportunity to attend the public hearings, never once mentioned to me that she was talking about doing an amendment. And so the first time I knew the amendment existed is when someone put it on my desk. So one, I was very disappointed with that. She never voiced any concerns in the committee or anything of that nature. So yes, I was very surprised, because I think the amendment effectively guts the bill. One of the things that we might do, of course, is to not pass his so-called flexibility and accountability legislation, or to modify it in such a way that it requires that these things which are now voluntary are in fact mandatory.
Those who oppose the original measures say money has been spent to prepare these underachieving students to take the test. Representative Fran Miller was unimpressed by Representative Holmes' assertion that his bill had support from the largest teachers organizations in the state, including the Georgia Association of Educators.
But folks, we passed this law in 2000. Now, I like teachers and I respect teachers, but on this issue, the GAE needs to get over it. It's about time we stop pandering to the educational bureaucracy. This is about children, third grade children. In 2000, this body drew a line in the sand. Local school systems, folks, have known this day was coming for 4 years. Let's do the right thing. Let's stay the course and show the people of this state we're serious about improving education.
Again, House Bill 1310 passed the House, but with a significant amendment. It now moves to the Senate.
In other news, Georgia's State Board of Education today unanimously voted to leave the word evolution in a revised biology curriculum. State School Superintendent Kathy Cox wanted to replace the word evolution with the phrase biological changes over time. That proposal drew criticism, and the new draft of the curriculum, to be voted on in June, will contain the word evolution.
In other news, the House votes to change the way the state's gasoline tax is allocated. Representative Paul Smith said he had trouble explaining the difference between 3% and 4% to his colleagues. Representative Larry O'Neill said that his questions went deeper than that.
I have to trust attorneys such as you to write this correctly, Mr. O'Neill.
Well, will the chairman further yield?
Yes, sir.
Again, these are friendly questions. I'm for what you're trying to do.
I'm not sure, but go ahead.
Do you disagree with me, though, that the language 1% of the amount collected?
Tell me where you are.
I'm back on page 1 again. Not what I understand the bill's attempting to do is take 1/4 of what is now a 4% tax and move it to DOT, and then split it 25-75. That part I'm fine with. But 1% of the amount collected is not a 1% of that 4%. If you read it literally, that's all I'm asking you.
I understand that, but I just
the map is worded wrong.
The bill was tabled for about 30 minutes while an amendment was crafted to make the amounts clearer. House Bill 1295 passed 152-1 and now goes to the Senate.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta toured Atlanta's Midtown road projects today. He's calling on Congress to pass a highway funding bill that would help fund many of Georgia's current and future transportation projects. David Zelski joins us live with more. David.
Well, thanks, Gerald. The American Highway Users Alliance released a survey yesterday listing 3 Metro Atlanta interchanges in the top 20 for the nation's worst traffic bottlenecks. Today, Secretary Mineta applauded some of Georgia's work to help fight this congestion.
Seeing the actual roadway, the traffic, and the surrounding neighborhoods and businesses really drives home the importance that these investments have on the economy and on the daily lives of people.
The Georgia Department of Transportation Commissioner Harold Linencohl shared some of Georgia's road improvement plans with Secretary Mineta.
Not just one project is the answer. We've got several projects that tie together.
A major bottleneck is defined as a location that caused drivers at least 700,000 hours of delay every year. The Interstate 75-85 interchange, for instance, is ranked 6th.
75 and 85, or 285 and 85, you have got major arteries that not one project is going to correct.
2 bills in Congress would help fund projects to improve traffic congestion. President George Bush's administration proposed a plan called the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, and Efficient Transportation Equity Act of 2003, or SAFE-T. It would bring $1 billion to Georgia's infrastructure maintenance and improvements every year.
The President's bill would provide $256 billion in funding for states to build road projects, transit projects, and make safety improvements over a 6-year period. It would not raise gas taxes, it would not involve deficit spending, and it would not take money from other programs to pay the bills.
Now, unless Congress passes some kind of transportation package soon, current projects like the 17th Street Bridge and future projects like HOV lanes in parts of Cobb and Gwinnett County could face some major delays. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thank you, David. In other news, Senate Majority Leader Bill Stevens today had some strong words about members of the Georgia House. Stevens said it was time for them to lead, follow, or get out of the way.
It's clear to any reasonable observer that this Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, is made up of workhorses, and the House is made up of show horses. Evidence of that, here's just a sampling of the bills that we have passed in this body that are languishing in the House. We have passed child protection legislation last year and again this year. We have passed ethics reform, meaningful ethics reform. A year before last year, and we're about to pass it again this year. We passed earlier this week, I believe, 3 bills of the Lieutenant Governor's package. We passed a fix for Atlanta's sewer system. We passed a statewide water planning bill, and last week the House voted against their own conference committee report on that very issue. Now, what was that? We passed open DOT board elections. We passed a Public-Private Partnership Act. We passed regulatory reform. We passed the Faith and Family Services Amendment. In the meantime, they're over there dealing with sweetheart projects in the budget, tree frogs, and earthworm farming. So to my colleagues across the way, I guess I kind of think of them as kind of a one-car motorcade stuck in the left lane, and we can't get by them. So as somebody once said, they need to either lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Pro Tem DuBose Porter denies that the House is dragging its feet on bills sent over by the Senate. The legislative process, he says, in part is slowed by Senate rules.
I think that's ridiculous for Bill to even put it in those terms. The budget originates in the House. Most of our work has been on the budget until it gets to a form to get it to the Senate. Realize when it's a tight time like this, and thank goodness we did look at it closely because we found the governor had missed $180 million between this year's next year's budget, and reassessing our priorities in education took a great deal of time. Now, the Senate also has this crazy rule that won't take House bills after the 33rd day. We'll take Senate bills forever. So the pressure on us is go ahead and get bills to them by the 33rd day. So we're taking up House bills. Every year they complain about this, but they won't change the rule. We take the Senate bills up after we take the House bills up. This is no different than any other year.
Well, now, certainly the news that the House redistricting maps had been rejected by that three-judge panel, was something that is going to take up some time in regards to the House as well. How is reapportionment faring?
Well, they're reviewing some maps today. They have one they reviewed yesterday. Exactly while we're speaking, they're looking at the other Senate map and the Republican recommendations on the House map. So we're moving forward with that. There's a lot of work going on here in the House, and for them to posture that way, I think is just not productive, but not surprising either.
Well, now, you have just come out of the Hope Scholarship Committee meeting as well. I understand that the governor is still standing today behind his suggestion that the SAT needs to be linked to the Hope Scholarship. I'm wondering if that was brought up at all, and where do you stand on that?
It was not brought up at all. In fact, I wish the governor would drop that. The bipartisan commission did not recommend that. It's not in the bill that was drawn by the bipartisan commission in the House and the Republican Senate. There's just not the support to do that. By adding the SAT changes the entire nature of the Hope Scholarship. The Hope Scholarship is based on achievement. Now, how you set that achievement, by a B average or a 3.0, 4.0 type schedule, that's what you've got to decide, but it needs to be on, if you work a little harder, you put a little more effort into it, you get that B or higher, then you've earned something, and that is the Hope Scholarship. To put an SAT on it, there's so much disparity from the state, especially my area. There's no question that rural areas of the state do not test as well. To put an arbitrary test like that on students would ruin the direction of Hope Scholarship, which is the most successful program in the country on job development and higher education. And maybe the governor just doesn't understand the Hope Scholarship. I'm just surprised that he keeps coming back with that. But that was not discussed today by either Democrats or Republicans.
I asked Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson about the pace of this General Assembly session. He said the Senate is frustrated because of House inaction.
Here we are halfway through the legislative session, and the House hasn't dealt with some critical bills that the Senate passed last year. Child endangerment. Georgia's the last state not to have a child endangerment statute. We've sent it to the House 1, 2, 3 different times. They have principles of redistricting. They have equal strikes for prosecutors. They have numerous bills that the people of Georgia want that they won't act on it, and they won't even bring them to the floor. They just bottle them up in committee, and they're worrying about minuscule legislation like earthworm farming. And so the Senate is growing frustrated. We want to move, we want to work, we want to go home, we want to get back to our families, and we want to get the economy turned around and keep moving.
Well, assaulting a guide dog could become a felony if a measure passed by the House today becomes law. Representative Tom Rice explains that he introduced House Bill 211 on behalf of a constituent who was paralyzed by polio.
She has a service dog by the name of Tuthill. Tuthill has the capability to raise the treadles on her wheelchair, to stand in front of her wheelchair as she gets out of the chair, and to assist her in getting someplace in the room without the aid of that wheelchair. That dog can even go to the refrigerator and get a bottle of water for her. And he helps Miss Dietrich go to dance lessons and a number of other things that she wouldn't be able to do without the assistance of that dog. She brought me this bill in response to a growing number of incidents which are reported anecdotally in a sheaf of different emails I have from other peoples who have guard dogs or for sighted dogs or other service dogs about incidences where they have either been harassed or attacked by other dogs or people who allow their dogs to do so.
An amendment to protect a breed of monkey also used for the assistance of the disabled was defeated. House Bill 211 passed 162 to 1 and now goes to the Senate.
Legislation seeking to prohibit smoking in certain public places and places of employment was discussed by the Senate Health and Human Services Committee today. Proponents say Senate Bill 507, the Georgia Smoke-Free Air Act of 2004, will help improve public health in Georgia. Senator Don Thomas, a physician and sponsor of the bill, stressed the dangers of secondhand smoke.
I cannot overemphasize the importance of the passage of this bill because secondhand smoke contains some 4,000 chemicals, 200 are poisonous, 43 cause cancer. The EPA established it as a known cause of cancer in humans, group A carcinogen, the same as asbestos, and we've spent millions and millions of dollars. We don't go into the restaurant and they don't say, would you like to be in the asbestos section or the smoking section?
There was a successful amendment, then Senate Bill 507 passed unanimously and moves to the Senate Rules Committee.
Well, today, the Senate Public Safety Committee passed SB 506. This bill prohibits the use and the installation of televisions or other visual receiving devices in cars when they're visible to the driver. Senator Balfour explained that auto manufacturers support this bill and its exemptions.
Senate Bill 506 is a bill that's passed in a couple other states, and it basically is something that the car manufacturers don't have a problem with. I've talked to them. They wouldn't do this to begin with, but basically it's talking about entertainment devices ought to be in the back seat, not anywhere in the front seat. It exempts out things like global navigation, vehicle information displays, mapping devices that are already there, so that there's been input from Detroit on this, but it wouldn't just have to do with Detroit. It also would have to do with people that renovate vans and things like that. The DVD player ought to be if it's mounted in the back seat.
Senate Bill 506 now goes to Senate Rules.
Well, NASCAR is coming to the Capitol on March 11th. In the Senate today, a resolution proclaiming the upcoming Atlanta Motor Speedway Day.
This year, we're going to not only have some race cars, but we will also have the truck series. We'll have some of the trucks here, which they're going to start this year at the Atlanta Speedway. As many of you know, this event in Georgia brings into our economy $455 million, and it brings in more revenue for 2 races a year at the track than the Braves, Hawks, and Falcons combined.
Members of the Senate want to thank the senator from the 17th and the 44th for their...
Well, coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the Senate is expected to vote on their redistricting maps, and the Georgia Cancer Coalition will introduce 32 distinguished cancer clinicians and scientists who have been recruited to work here in Georgia. We'll have those stories and all the latest from under the Gold Dome tomorrow at 7. Just another reminder for those of you with access to the internet, you can always watch Lawmakers online. Just visit our website at www.gpb.org. Lawmakers is streamed live, then archived on our site. Every night we're here on the air. Ever wonder how to cut a pane of glass or install a portable air conditioner? Well, be sure to stay tuned for Ask This Old House. That program is next here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
That's our broadcast for this, the 21st day of the Georgia General Assembly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gerald Bryant.
I'm Wandy Lawson. For everyone here at Lawmakers, good night.